Hi, everybody. How are you doing today? I hope you're well. We are still rocking and rolling and talking about stress and how stress affects us on a daily basis. I know some of you are dealing with children who are going to school, whether that's in person or virtually. Others are dealing with getting back in the swing of things of work. Yet some others are still off from work because either their jobs have furloughed them or their jobs have unfortunately closed. And yet there are those of us who are dealing with the after effects or the effects of COVID 19 and what that means. Having loved ones who have been sick, loved ones who may have passed on. But this is a very, very stressful time for all of us. I don't think I know anybody who is not reeling from the pressures and the stress of just this season that we're in. And that's why we're talking about stress because, I mean, we cannot continue to bear the load of stress that we do without negative effects on our body, minds, and spirits. So, this is the reason that we are continuing to do our nighttime lives. I'm Marcelyn Bailey of ML Bailey Consultants, and you are inside of ML Bailey Consultants Live. We are dealing with stress. And today I wanted to talk about, in particular, four types of stress that I've I've just named them what makes sense to me. And I wanted to share that with you. But there are four types of stress that contribute to burnout. Now, when most people think about burnout or talk about burnout, they talk about it as if burnout means that we are overwhelmed with stress. Well, yeah, that's part of it. When you're burned out, you are overwhelmed with stress. You are consumed with the pressures of life, work, all that surrounding you. And it's very difficult to function. It's just hard to think. It's hard to manage. It's just difficult trying to get through the day. But there is an additional component to burnout that many of us don't even talk about or we don't consider. When a person is burned out, they literally cannot function. They cannot get out of bed. Getting out of bed is a struggle, and they have to force their way out of bed. And most people who are burned out don't get out of bed. They just stay there because they're feeling depressed, they are anxious, they are totally and extremely overwhelmed by pressure and stress. So being burned out is not just being overwhelmed with stress. Burned out means that you are unable to function. You cannot do just the regular, normal things that you do during the day. It's too difficult. It is too hard. And for some, it is even painful. It's just painful to move. So, we wanted to talk about the four types of stress that contribute to burnout. Because in order to prevent burnout, we have to at least recognize the types of stress that we experience throughout the day and also be able to manage those different types of stress. So, the first type of stress that I wanted to share with you is what I call aggravating little things. And I started calling them aggravating little things after sand gnats that are very prevalent in the area in which I live. Sand gnats are little flies. They're like tiny little uh, sand flies. That's another name for them. But they are very tiny and they swarm. I mean, On a spring morning before the sun fully comes up and it gets really warm, sand gnats, it's like they come out of the ground and they start swarming you, swarming your head, swarming your body, your arms. And they're awful little things. I can't stand them. And I can't stand them because they're so small. They can get into your nose, your ears, your mouth, or even get in your eye. Isn't that gross? Yeah, it is really gross, but it's true. So, sand gnats swarm, and there's lots of them, and it's hard to get rid of them. You can't swat them away because the more you swat, the more come after you. You can't spray them away because they seem to be resistant to bug repellent. So, you have to try to figure you have to either cover yourself completely or use incense, like the smoke from the incense, to keep them at bay. Even that doesn't work always. The thing about sand gnats is they bite. They bite and leave welts on you just like mosquitoes do. And they're itchy there and they just leave them all over your hand. And unlike mosquitoes that, you may see one or two flying, you have tons of sand gnats coming at you at one time. Well, aggravating little things are like that too. And when I think about aggravating little things, those stressors that we experience during the day, it reminds me of those sand gnats. And let me give you an example. Let's say you get up in the morning, and first of all, the first sand gnat that you have to, or aggravating little thing that you have to deal with, is the fact that your alarm didn't go off. And so you woke up late. Then you got dressed, you're ready to walk out to your car, and you spill something on yourself, which means you have to change clothes. So you change clothes, that's the second thing that's happened. You change clothes, you go out, but you're late. So that's the third thing. You know you're going to be late for work unless you drive really fast. So you get into traffic and you're being a little reckless because you're driving a little too fast and you're cutting in. You get to a light and you say, "Oh, I'm going to make it." And you drive through the light right before it turns red. Well, a cop sees you and the cop stops you. That's the next thing that gets you. The cop may not give you a ticket, but tells you to be careful. You get to work only to find that you have someone waiting for you and you're late for your meeting. Those are those aggravations that we deal with on a day-to-day basis. It could also be something as simple as your child forgetting to tell you that they had a field trip and they need money for the field trip. That's an aggravation. It could also mean that you get into your car and your teenager used your car and the needle is on E, so you don't have any gas. That's another aggravation. It could also be something like you forget your debit card at home, so you have no way to pay for lunch. That's an aggravation. So these little things that happen to us throughout the day are those aggravating little things. Well, each time one happens, we get a burst of stress relief, stress response. The stress response kicks in and we react. It's a physical reaction, and then it causes us an emotional reaction after we think about what's going on. So aggravating little things is one type of stress that contributes to burnout. The second type of stress that I want to talk about is juggling. And again, this is my term for it, but I like jugglers, people who can juggle because they can juggle so many different things at one time, right? And it's amazing how they do it. Sometimes their arms are going like this, sometimes it's going like this, but they're keeping balls in the air. I learned how to catch when I was a little kid, and I'm sure you did too. And when you're playing catch, it's pretty easy once you get the hang of it to toss the ball and catch it, toss the ball and catch it. But then what happens when you have two? It takes more skill to keep two balls in the air at one time. You add three, and that takes a whole different level of skill. Well, professional jugglers juggle with balls, bowling pins, knives, fruit, and they sometimes juggle with a combination of those things, right? Well, when we're juggling stresses that we experience throughout the day, it is a combination of things, isn't it? It's not just one type of stress, and it's not just one event or one action that we're trying to juggle. It's a combination of things. We're juggling appointments for our children and ourselves. And if you have older parents, you're also juggling appointments for them. We're juggling our schedules, trying to make sure we can get everybody where they need to be at the time they need to, right? But we're also, in addition to juggling schedules and juggling appointments, we're also juggling our finances. We're juggling money. We're trying to figure out, okay, I can pay this. I'm going to pay this amount this month, and then I'm going to pay this amount next month. And oh yeah, I want to pay this off. So I need to put my budget together so I can pay this off. Oh yes, I also still have to budget for gas money, transportation money if I take public transportation. I have to budget for our groceries. I also have to make sure I have money to give the kids for their lunch or for the field trip or for that yearbook that they want. So we're juggling our finances. But so we're juggling appointments, we're juggling our finances, and guess what? We're also juggling emotions. How often do you have to juggle your emotions so that you're not setting someone else off or hurting their feelings, as well as juggling the emotions of those people who are close to you, including your family? So, the second type of stress that contributes to burnout is juggling. And again, this is my term for it because this is how I understand it. So, we've talked about aggravating little things, and we've also talked about juggling. I'm going to talk about the third type of stress. The third type of stress is one thing after another. And there's a song. I don't know who sings. I can't remember who sings it. Excuse me. But the song goes, if it ain't one thing, it's another. And that's so true. If it's not one thing, it's another. It's constant. Something is always happening. And to give you an example of that, one thing after another, and that type of stress, I'm going to share what happened with us from the holidays up until now. Okay, so right at around Christmas time, our microwave stopped working. So to prevent buying a new microwave, my husband fixed it. It needed a new part. Then our refrigerator went bad. So we called the repairman in, and the repairman fixed it, but then he didn't, because a week later it went kaput totally. So the microwave first and then the refrigerator. So we had to get a new refrigerator. Then the oven stopped working. And I mean, this is one thing after another. It happened like right after another. The oven stopped working. So Christmas, and this was Christmas, I was thinking, how am I going to bake the turkey? My husband fixed the oven. It needed a part, so he fixed it. Then fast forward to March, where we're in the beginning stages of the pandemic. Guess what? Our freezer died. The freezer died. Not knowing what was going to happen, if we needed to stock up on food, because the food chain was going, we just didn't know. So we had to get a freezer. So that's one thing after another. Then we had to get tires. For our cars, both cars. So that impacted us financially, right? It was a major impact on us financially to have to get new appliances and or repair the appliances we had because we had to pay for them. So that's what I mean by one thing after another. It's the type of stress where major events happen that happen in succession. So we've talked about uh, aggravating little things like the sand gnats, right? That you want to bat away, but they just keep swarming. We've talked about juggling, where you're trying to keep all of those balls in the air without dropping anything or hurting yourself. And then one thing after another, where major events occur in your life in succession, one after the other. The fourth type of stress that contributes to burnout is that chronic, ongoing stress. Now, I have an activity that I use to actually illustrate chronic, ongoing stress. And basically, it's where I ask someone to hold a reference book in their hands, just like a serving tray. They hold it, but they can't use their body to brace their arms, but they have to hold the reference book out front. And then when they've held that reference book for about 5 minutes, I add another reference book to it. So they're holding two reference books. And when they've held that for 5 minutes, I give them another reference book to hold so they can hold three reference books. And I always gauge the pressure that the person is under because they're trying to hold these books, but they're also holding the books and trying not to drop them, but feeling fatigue in their arms and their hands. First is your hands begin to get, and your arms start to get tired, and then they even start to ache. And then they start to burn, the muscles begin to burn. So when you hold that for an extended period, those three books for an extended period of time, you begin to feel extreme discomfort, pain, burning. It's not a good feeling. The reason I do that is because when we are under extreme chronic stress, we notice the pain emotionally, mentally, physically. But what we do is we keep going. When I do my exercise, my activity with someone, I always ask them, are you ready to put the books down? Is it getting too much for you? And at a point, they usually say, yes, this is too much. And we stop the activity. But we don't do that when we're under extreme chronic stress. We feel as if we should keep going. We push through as if we are super women. We keep it moving because that's what's expected of us. And then at a point, we crash. We crash and we burn essentially because we can't get out of bed. We are totally overwhelmed and totally wiped out. But on top of that, we are discouraged, we've lost our hope, and we feel there's no way out. That's the point where we have reached burnout. So these are the four types of stress that, again, these are how I describe them because it's how I understand them. These are four types of stress that contribute to burnout: aggravating little things, chronic, ongoing stress, the one thing after another, and juggling. And again, when you can recognize the type of stress that you're experiencing, you can develop strategies to manage that stress or alleviate it. I'm Marcelin Bailey. I'm glad you joined me today. We're going to continue to talk about stress, and we're also going to continue to talk about how to manage it without getting to a burnout stage. That's it for now. As always, take good care.